Here we go with part 3 of this tour of the posters in the Grateful Dead concert poster exhibition running at the Narrow Center through April 1, 2023. Meanwhile, back at the Avalon in the spring of 1966, Chet Helms needed to find some new designers and began working with Alton, Kelley, and Stanley Mouse, who were a graphic design team. Mouse was an accomplished airbrusher and cartoonist, well known at hot rod shows for his crazy vehicles and characters. Kelley was actually part of the family dog group that were out at the Red Dog in Virginia City back in 1965. Kelley didn't have the technical ability he wanted, and so he teamed up with Mouse, who did. Mouse and Kelley's designs were more eclectic than Wes Wilson's, but typically included a central image meant to stimulate the mind or just catch your eye, surrounded by Mouse's lettering. This was Mouse and Kelley's first poster for the Grateful Dead for shows in August 1966. If you look closely at the Frankenstein Monster's eyes, you will notice that he looks like he's completely toasted. Well, evidently so were the artists, because they misspelled the name Grateful Dead. Now, the Grateful Dead were sort of shopping for a logo in 1966, some sort of graphical representation beyond just the name. To an extent, the poster artists were auditioning their designs, and here were two of them. But the winner would come next month from Mouse and Kelley. And here it is, the magnum opus. Mouse and Kelley were in the San Francisco General Library. That's what we called the internet back then. And they were looking for inspiration and an image to use to advertise a September 1966 Grateful Dead show at the Avalon. They found this drawing of a skeleton and roses by Edward Joseph Sullivan. It was done in 1885 and was used to illustrate one of the quatrains of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. They instantly knew it was perfect. Since they had found this in the rare book section of the library, they couldn't take it out to copy. So Kelley took out a pocket knife and sliced the picture out of the book. Back at the studio, Mouse added the lettering, and then they added the color at the printer. Here's a sweet little poster from October 8th, 1966 by Mouse and Kelley, featuring Winnie the Pooh, who looks like he's holding a kilo under his left arm, and Piglet, why, is he smoking a joint? According to Alton Kelley, yes. This rare November 1966 Grateful Dead poster celebrates their one-year anniversary with their only show at the Old Cheese Factory in San Francisco. The Art Nouveau style seen here was considered a distant relative of psychedelia with its organic, flowing style. This poster was from December of 1966 for the Grateful Dead at the Avalon, and it was done by Victor Moscoso, who is another one of San Francisco's Big Five poster artists. While Moscoso did other art for the Dead later on, he only did one concert poster, and here it is. Known as Hippie Santa, referring to the horns, Moscoso calls it Satanic Santa. The last member of the San Francisco Big Five is Rick Griffin. Born in 1944 and raised in Southern California, Griffin was a surfer who was also deeply influenced by exposure to Native American, Egyptian, and other classic ancient cultures that would later be reflected in the motifs and symbols he used in his psychedelic posters. Griffin worked as the staff artist at Surfer magazine and also decorated hot rods and motorcycles like Stanley Mouse. Formerly trained at Chouinard Institute, which is now called Cal Arts, he heard about what was going on in San Francisco, and he and his wife moved up there to be part of it. His first poster was an alternative take on the human being, January 14, 1967. Here is a really wild poster by Rick Griffin for the Grateful Dead at the Shrine Exhibition Hall in Los Angeles, July 1968. Griffin did this poster for a show in Honolulu in July 1968, but the Dead decided not to fly out there and the concert was canceled. The printer realized that he wasn't going to get paid, and he destroyed all the posters, except for around 30 that Griffin was able to talk him out of and take back to San Francisco with him. Exceptionally rare. Does it look familiar? Not coincidentally, then, it is known as the Hawaiian Oxamoxa. Since the previous poster was not circulated, Griffin had no ethical problems reusing some of its themes, like the giant sun and the elaborate Grateful Dead lettering, for this, his opus, Oxamoxa. This poster from January 1969 announced shows at the Avalon by a new promoter, Soundproof Productions, who wanted to make a splash. The Dead liked the artwork so much that they asked Griffin to adapt it for their third album cover, which came out in June 1969, Oxamoxa. The foundation of the psychedelic poster revolution was well laid by mid-1968. Up until that time, the most eye-popping posters were made by one or more members of what is referred to as the San Francisco Big Five. Now we're going to look at some other posters that are in the exhibition. And while we will hear from Rick Griffin and Mouse and Kelley later, we're going to pause to say goodbye and thank you to the Big Five seen here in a July 1967 Bob Seidemann photo from left to right: Alton Kelley, Victor Moscoso, Rick Griffin, Wes Wilson, and Stanley Mouse. It's time to move on to part 4.